Chapter 3. The Depths of the Past. The sky had bled into a haunting shade of grey, clouds pressing low and thick over the churning sea. The storm from the previous night had not fully passed. It lingered in the air like a living thing, growling and restless. But for now the ocean's fury was held at bay. A heavy silence clinging to the ship as it carved a path through the slate-coloured waves. Alya leaned against the ship's railing, her eyes tracing the horizon as if searching for something hidden, beyond the endless expanse of water. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the relic, its cool surface pressing into her palm. Its glow had dimmed since their escape from Issaris, but it still pulsed faintly, like the last ember of a dying fire. Sleep had eluded her. Whenever she closed her eyes, visions swarmed her mind. Fragments of cities drowning beneath blackened waves, twisted shapes moving through the darkness, and eyes like molten gold staring into her soul. The relic was pulling her into something far greater than herself, something that terrified her as much as it fascinated her. Bad dreams. Kieran's voice broke through her thoughts, rough and tinged with exhaustion. The pirate captain looked as haggard as she felt. Dark shadows clung beneath his eyes, his skin pale against the tangled mess of his hair, but there was a sharpness to his gaze, a readiness that spoke of someone who had survived too many battles to be brought down by mere sleeplessness. Something like that, Alya admitted, her fingers tracing the swirling patterns carved into the relic's surface. It's this thing, it feels alive. Kieran snorted, his mouth twisting into something resembling a smile. You say that like it's a good thing. Most of the time, relics like that are cursed beyond reason. And yet here we are, sailing toward even more trouble because of it. Alya's eyes narrowed. You didn't have to come with me, didn't I? Kieran's gaze flicked toward the darkened sea, his expression hardening. You've got a lot to learn about this world, Saran, about the monsters lurking under its surface, and I'm not just talking about the ones swimming below. Alya shivered. She could feel it, the unnatural stillness in the air, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Is that why you're helping me? She asked. Because you're afraid of whatever this relic is connected to. Kieran's expression twisted, torn between anger and something else. Afraid? Maybe. But I've seen things you wouldn't believe. Things I wish I hadn't. And this? He nodded toward the relic. It's tied to the worst of it. What happened? Alya asked, her voice a cautious whisper. Kieran's eyes darkened. Years ago, my crew and I were scavenging the shattered sea. We came across an underwater ruin, ancient, untouched. We thought we'd struck gold, but the moment we started taking things, relics, artifacts, anything that looked valuable, the sea itself turned against us. Alya listened, her breath catching as she saw the memory play across Kieran's face, like a ghost he couldn't shake. The water rose faster than a ship could run. Creatures I've never seen before. Things, made of shadow and salt, came crawling out of the depths. They tore through us like we were nothing. His fists clenched, his knuckles white. I lost most of my crew that day, and those of us who made it out we were cursed, hunted. Hunted by what? Whatever sleeps beneath the waves. Kieran's gaze met hers, his eyes fierce. And now you've gone and woken it up. All over again. Alya's grip tightened on the relic. So you think helping me will somehow undo what you did? Kieran laughed, a bitter sound that held no joy. Maybe. Maybe not. But if this relic really is what I think it is, then we're both in more trouble than you realize. What do you mean? There's a legend among the Aquarim, Kieran said, about the last days of Zharokh. The kingdom didn't just fall because of greed or war. It fell because someone tried to control something they shouldn't have. Alya's heart thudded painfully in her chest. The Leviathans, Kieran nodded. Monsters of the deep, they called them. Beasts with the power to level cities and reshape the world. Zharokh tried to harness that power, and it ended them. But that was centuries ago, Alya said. The Leviathans are gone. Gone? Kieran's smile was cold. No, just sleeping. And if that relic of yours is waking them up, then it's not just the wraiths we have to worry about. Alya swallowed, the weight of his words sinking into her bones. "You keep saying we. Why? You don't owe me anything." Kieran's gaze softened, just a fraction. "Maybe not, but I owe a debt to the people I couldn't save. And whether you believe it or not, Seran, I'm not ready to let the past drown me." For a moment, there was nothing but the creak of the ship and the quiet hum of the ocean's breath. Then in the distance a dark shape broke the surface of the water. Alya's eyes snapped toward the movement, her pulse quickening. What was that? Kieran's expression twisted with recognition. Trouble, lots of it. The crew was already moving, shouts rising as weapons were drawn and preparations made. Alya barely had time to process the panic spreading across the deck before the first explosion of water erupted beside the ship. Something massive crashed against the hull, the impact so powerful it nearly threw her off her feet. The ship groaned under the pressure, wood splintering as the unseen force continued its assault. "Kieran!" she shouted, her voice swallowed by the chaos. "Stay back!" he roared, drawing his sword as he pushed through the scrambling crew. "This isn't just the storm, it's them." Alya's blood ran cold. "The Leviathans?" Kieran's gaze was grim. "Or something worse." Before she could respond, the relic flared to life, its glow brighter than ever. And with it came a sound, a deep resonant hum that echoed through her bones. The ocean was speaking. And whatever it was trying to say, it was not a warning. It was a call, all right? Let's continue and make this thrilling chapter even more immersive. The ocean roared with a fury that made the previous night's storm seem like a gentle breeze. Waves crashed against the hull of the ship, their icy spray mingling with the acrid smell of smoke and blood. Whatever had struck them was no mere beast. It was something far older and far angrier. Alya's fingers curled around the relic as if it were the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. Its glow throbbed against her palm, so intense that the light cut through the fog and chaos surrounding them. "Kieran!" she shouted, her voice strained against the noise. "What's happening?" Kieran's response was swallowed by a sudden, explosive crash. The ship lurched violently to the side, nearly tossing Alya overboard. She gripped the railing with one hand, her knuckles white as her eyes searched the rolling waves for the source of the attack. Then she saw it. A monstrous shape twisted just beneath the surface, its body coiling and uncoiling like the shadow of a living nightmare. The creature's sheer size defied reason, stretching longer than the ship itself, its dark scales glistening whenever they broke the water. But what chilled Alya most were the eyes that glowed with a cold, merciless intelligence. The Leviathan. Alya breathed, her words barely a whisper. "Whatever it is, it's not here to chat," Kieran yelled, his sword clutched tight in his hand. "Get below deck, now!" "But now!" Alya hesitated only for a moment before turning and stumbling toward the stairway that led below deck. She hadn't made it halfway before another impact shook the ship, sending her crashing to the floor. Pain lanced through her shoulder, but she forced herself to stand. Around her, the crew fought with a desperate ferocity, launching harpoons and firing crude cannons into the churning water. But their weapons seemed laughably small against the vastness of the beast that circled them. She looked down at the relic in her hand, its glow now burning so brightly it hurt her eyes. It was as if the stone itself was responding to the Leviathan's presence, feeding off its rage and returning it in kind. And then she heard the voice, a low, resonant hum that echoed through her mind, clear and cold as the deepest depths of the ocean. It was not words, not exactly. It was more like an impression, a feeling made of sound. "Why do you disturb our rest, child of the sea?" Alya gasped, the voice reverberating through her skull with such force that she nearly dropped the relic. But the question had not been cruel nor demanding. It was curious. I didn't mean to disturb anything," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to find out what happened to Zharokh, to understand why everything fell apart." The voice did not respond, but its presence remained, coiled around her like a great unseen serpent. It was not just one mind speaking to her, it was many. A chorus of ancient voices woven into one. Another tremor shook the ship, and the sound of splintering wood filled the air. Screams followed, some of them cut brutally short. Alya's vision swam with panic. She couldn't stay here. She had to find Kieran. Stumbling to her feet, she forced herself back up the stairs and onto the deck. What she saw nearly shattered her courage. The Leviathan had breached the surface, its head towering over the ship like a mountain of blackened scale and muscle. Its eyes burned with the intensity of suns, fixed directly on her. But it was not alone. Around the ship, smaller creatures writhed and twisted in the water. Grotesque things with limbs shaped like tendrils and jaws that snapped hungrily at anything that came near. They swarmed the ship's sides, dragging sailors into the depths, with a ravenous eagerness. "Kieran!" Alya screamed, her voice raw with terror. He appeared from the shadows, blood streaking his arms and face. His sword was already slick with whatever passed for blood in the creatures below. "You're still alive," he grunted. "Good. Keep it that way." "What do we do?" Alya cried, her voice breaking. "We fight." Kieran's expression was wild, his eyes alight with a madness born of survival. "Or we die. Take your pick." The ship shuddered again, and this time the sound of splitting wood came from below. The beast was tearing them apart piece by piece. Alya looked down at the relic, its light so bright now that it felt as though it would burn through her skin. It was trying to tell her something, to guide her. But she didn't know how to listen. "Kieran, the relic. Now's not the time for—" "No, listen," she snapped, her desperation boiling over. "It's trying to tell me something. I think I can use it." Kieran stared at her as if she'd gone mad, but his gaze flicked to the relic and then back to the creatures swarming the deck. His expression hardened. "Then do it." Alya closed her eyes, blocking out the chaos around her. She focused on the relic's glow, on the hum of its energy vibrating through her veins. The sound that had spoken to her was still there, faint but persistent. "Help us, Yi," she whispered, her voice carried by the relic's power. "Show me what to do." The response came like a rush of icy water. Words carved themselves into her mind, not spoken but imprinted, like memories pulled from the deep. "The song of the sea is not yours to command, but you may channel its voice, if you are willing to pay the price." Alya's breath shuddered. "What price?" "The sea gives nothing freely. It takes as much as it offers. But if you wish to live, you will accept the bargain." She hesitated for only a moment. Then she whispered, "I accept." The relic's light exploded outward, a brilliant flare of blue-white energy that washed over the ship and cast the world into sharp, unnatural clarity. The sea itself seemed to recoil from the force, the creatures in the water screeching and thrashing as if burned. The Leviathan's roar shattered the air, a sound so vast and terrible that it threatened to tear the sky apart, but it did not strike. It lingered, watching her with eyes full of ancient fury and curiosity. And then, slowly, it sank back into the depths, its followers scattering like shadows in the wind. Alya collapsed to her knees, the relic's glow dimming until it was nothing, more than a dull, icy stone clutched in her trembling hands. What just happened?" Kieran asked, his voice barely a rasp. I think I made a deal," Alya whispered. "But I don't know what the price is."